Hey everyone, it's Classic DM. We want to go over another topic as we learn Pathfinder Second Edition called Identify Magic. Now, if you've been playing D&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or any of the editions of Pathfinder over a long period of time, you know that you're going to discover loot and treasure and get all kinds of neat things. And one of the things you're going to want to do is figure out, what does it do? What is this item I found? Well, this video is going to kind of go over this, and we're going to do it relatively quickly. We're not going to be real long-winded like we've done some of our other ones. Hopefully keep your attention span engaged. So, first off, right about, what are we going to have in this video? So, obviously, we're going to talk about identifying a magic item in this Pathfinder Second Edition. We're going to give you a skills overview. So we're going to talk about skills because all this relates back to skills. Now, we're not going to teach you the entire skill system, but we are going to lightly talk about how the DC checks happen because they're going to affect your success at identifying something. We're also going to talk about the general skill actions. This is what you actually use when you identify a magic item. It's called Identify Magic. So we also make sure we touch on how the proficiency affects things. So that means untrained, trained, expert, mastery, and legendary, which there's some caps to that based on levels, and that can have an effect on whether you're successful identifying something or not, right? And we kind of need to know, well, who in the game can actually identify things, and that's actually pretty surprising. In previous versions of D&D and things like that, only certain people could do it, and had to have a spell, and you had to get a scroll, and all kinds of things like that. So as Pathfinder Second Edition has been evolving, I've been learning and running local campaigns here, which has been a lot of fun. It's a much more skill-oriented. So skill-oriented stuff, you need to train things, so it does make a difference. So as long as you're trained in the things you need to be trained in, we're going to talk about that. So if you've got those skills, and there's no reason why you can't get them, you can learn to identify something, whether you're a rogue or barbarian or a druid or anyone, right? And we're going to use a druid as an example. Funny I should say that. So let's go ahead and jump right in. If you want to follow along, we're going to start in Chapter 4 in the skill chapter on page 233. So right off the bat, you open up the chapter and you start reading, hey, listen, skills. Right, great, I got it. We're going to get all kinds of neat skills. What are we going to do with them? Well, this is where the identify magic stuff happens. So at the very top on the sidebar, take a look at the sidebar. You have improving skills. So as your character advances in level, there's two main ways your skills improve. This is very important to understand. There's two different things going on here. One of them is your skill increases, and you get skill feats. So your class list, which is something that's in your class chapter of your book, will tell you gain a skill, you have a skill increase, or you gain a skill feat. So a skill increase improves your proficiency with a skill, meaning that you can use it to increase your level of proficiency with it up to certain controlling caps. Now you see right down below, you see the little snapshot of the corner of the Pathfinder character sheet. We have proficiency, right? And all that ties back into our other video about proficiency bonus. So if you forgot about that, definitely go back and refresh your memory on proficiency bonus, because if you're not trained in something, you're untrained, you won't be able to take advantage of your level, and your level is part of what the proficiency bonus is. So when you're doing these checks against difficulty class, you're going to need that proficiency bonus. So getting something at least to trained will allow you to take into consideration your key ability score, allow you to take into consideration what rank you have in the skill, whether it's trained, expert, master, or legendary, and then obviously your level. So if you want to identify magic items, be sure you're trained in one of the 4 major skills headings. They're almost like subject matters, and we're going to get to that in a second. So this is really, really important. Now, a key thing I want to bring to your attention here. Some classes start off with things like, well, if, for example, a barbarian and I think it was a rogue and maybe the fighter, they'll start off with proficiency of expert in perception. Whereas like the druid and some other, even the monk doesn't, and some of the other classes, I think even the ranger gets that. So different classes start off with different levels of proficiency for things like perception. But let's take an example of our druid. The druid gets to start off with nature already at a trained level. So there's no reason why you can't keep raising that when you get the opportunity to expert, but when you hit level 7, that's kind of a cap. So until you get to level 7, then you can go a little bit higher than that. So from expert to master is the next jump. So this is something to take into consideration. It's like, okay, great. I want to be identifying magic items really, really well. I've watched a video and I learned the 4 different schools that I need to understand so I can start trying to make an attempt to identify something. Let me just go for master by level 5. Well, that's not going to work that way because it's capped. So it's controlled. So level 7 and level 15, that's on page 233 as well, kind of controls how rapidly you can get that proficiency up, all right? So that's a quick snapshot. So identifying something is a general skill. It's not a skill feat. So there's a lot of skills in the game. Let's just take a look at them. So if you flip over to the next page, you've got this chart on the right-hand side, Table 4-1. This lists the major 17 skills: acrobatics, arcana, athletics, crafting, deception, diplomacy, intimidation, lore, medicine, nature, occultism, performance, religion, society, stealth, survival, and thievery. Notice that perception is not in there. So perception is not a skill that you're going to train. Okay, so it's something that certain classes get a little boost on when they start the game. But we're going back into our identify magic item. So what do we need to do? Well, when you're trying to identify something, your game master is going to make you do a check. He's going to say, how hard is it to identify this really cool, crazy dagger with jewels and curved scabbard, and it's got gold and gems and rubies and emeralds on it and filigree details, and he's decided that this magical dagger, that he's going to give you a chance to try to identify it. He's like, okay, give me a roll of d20 and add me your skill modifier. Okay, so you need to know what your skill modifier is. If you see up at the top here on the left, the skill modifier depends on a number of key things. The modifier of the skill's key ability score, right? Because the skill you're trying to use is associated with an ability score, and you're going to see that in a minute too. If you look at the second column of the table, like for example, acrobatics, it's dexterity. Crafting is intelligence. Diplomacy is charisma. Occultism is intelligence, which might be interesting because you're playing a rogue, like you're playing Mauricio, you'll see that she's got a lot of occultism, but she's really a rogue. Why does she have high intelligence? So in stealth, dexterity. Thievery, dexterity. Nature, wisdom. Well, those things kind of make sense, right? Druid's got nature, and deception is charisma, but it's also kind of something used by the rogue. So it can get a little tricky, but there's an associated ability score. So the modifier of the associated ability score is considered. Then you need to add the proficiency bonus. Now remember, the proficiency bonus means you got to at least be trained, which gives you +2. And when you get beyond that, it gets +4, +6, and then +8. Masteries experts +4, masteries +6, and legendaries +8. That's what it is. The number's 2, 4, 6, 8. So you need that in there as well. So if you're at least trained, and then your level gets to count, that makes a big difference. So don't forget that your proficiency bonus, you've got to at least be trained. Don't forget that. A lot of people forget to add their level. So you're at least trained in one of the skills on the right that you need to identify something. Then you can roll to hit roll against the DC that the dungeon master or the game master has determined, and then you can see whether you successfully identify something. So let's look at this a little bit carefully. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, this is kind of a guide for the GM. He needs to kind of consider and make up in his mind, unless the module he's playing already tells him, like, how difficult is the task to do. If it's a common task that is untrained, the simple DC is 10. If it requires some training to do it, then it needs a 15. It's more of an expert thing to do, it needs a 20. And as you can see, you're only rolling a D20, so you're not going to get above 20 unless you have these other modifiers modifying things. So as you get higher and higher level, you're going to get to a point where going for a master skill and a legendary skill can actually happen, but it gets progressively harder. As you notice, something that's expert level, legendary is twice as difficult. So it's very important that you are at least trained in something, so your proficiency bonus is going to be included in that, right? So there's other bonuses and penalties that happen, whatever, that turns on the circumstances, right? So in summary on this one, be sure that you understand that the skill modifier to check to see if you can identify something meets that formula we see in the upper left-hand corner, which is proficiency bonus and the skill itself's key ability score, right? And different classes and different skills excel at different ability scores. So what they decided to do is, well, we don't want to make it with just wizards and sorcerers are identifying magic things. Let's share the love a little bit. So if we flip on over to the next page, let's go over to page, I think it's about page 238 or so. On 238 on the left-hand side, we see this is a general skill. It's not a skill feat, all right? It's a general skill. So decipher writing and recall knowledge. You've probably seen Jason and the streams that they're running on the Everflame. He's asking people to do recall. If you're living in the wilderness, you do subsist. So the identify magic is one of these general skills. Now, the way the identify magic system works is you roll against a DC that the GM sets for you. So once again, it depends on your game master, where he thinks it's really hard or really not. So their personal judgment, just like in the old days when AD&D, can kind of make a difference for you. There's only so much you can do as a player. What you want to do as a player is come to the table with the best bonuses possible to identify something. So what does it require you to do? Well, it depends upon what your skill is. So Arcana religion, occultism, and nature. Those are the 4 skills that will grant you bonuses. So in this case with a druid, she has nature, right? So each magical tradition has a corresponding skill, as you can see in that table below. You must have at least trained proficiency and rank and skill to use it to identify magic. So like I said before, if you're untrained in Arcana or religion or occultism or nature, then you're not going to be able to identify anything. You have no chance at all. You can't even roll. I don't think you would even be allowed to roll, right? Now, if you got at least trained, I mean, you're level 1 druid, for example, you're going to be trained in nature, if I'm not mistaken, and you're going to get a chance to roll. And you'll be sure to add your proficiency bonus and all the other type things that we saw on the previous page for the skill modifier. So this is really interesting. So remember that when you get ready to identify something, the way it works in the game's a little long, but they don't want you to sit there spam identifying until you just get it, right? It takes 10 minutes for you to attempt to identify it, and they kind of describe it there. Like you're looking at it, you're messing with the item, you're trying to figure out what it does. It's like someone handing you a firearm you never used, or giving you a motorcycle you've never driven. You're trying to figure out how it works. You feel probably kill yourself on it, but you see what you're saying. So there is if you fail, though, you can't try to the following day. It's kind of like if someone hands you a hockey stick and said, try to hit the hockey puck into the net. You've never done it before, maybe play basketball or soccer. You understand the general concept, but holding a hockey stick in your hand and using skates, you're not going to be able to figure it out. If you screw up the first day and you fail, you're going to probably think about it and internalize that, and you can come back the next day. So since there's things to do beyond encounter and exploration mode in the game, there's these downtime modes, that's a good time to try to maybe identify something again. So going back on the target here. So if we see for our example with our druid, she has +7 to a level 1, the pre-generated character, Linny or whatever her name is. She has magical tradition under primal, which is nature. So she's going to try to identify something like this gold dagger I was describing earlier. She's going to get to roll a d20 and add that +7 to it. But it also is going to include, that's her skill bonus, right? So we need ultimately to consider the proficiency bonus and other bonuses and penalties. So in this situation, in fact, I think it's already considered in this formula here. So you must at least be trained to try to identify something. So then you think to yourself, well, this seems kind of unfair. Only people get to cast spells get to do this kind of stuff. Well, there's no reason why you can't pick up at least trained in something. So you may find that if you're playing a rogue that you have occult, or if you're playing, you may want to use one of the archetypes and pick up a primal level to get a benefit from some of the druid stuff. So you may want to consider over the journey of your character's life, if you do want to identify things, to pick up at least one skill of Arcana, religion, occultism, and nature. So that's how that's going to work. This is a general skill activity, just like deciphering writing. That's going to come in handy. And the reason why this is so important, when you're playing through a lot of adventures and you're doing all these cool things, I like to lean heavily on the side of exploring tombs and dungeons and ancient civilizations and find out the history and all that kind of stuff. Other people may have campaigns that have a lot more like talking to NPCs and using diplomacy and seeing what the subplots are, more human-centric campaigns. If your adventure has you buying magic items from some shop somewhere, you don't need to identify them very much anymore. It'll probably be given to you. But if you're playing a campaign where you discover some artifact, like in King Tut's tomb, some magical crook, you may have to be identifying things often. So depending upon what your campaign's going to demand of you, may help you decide where to put your skill points and when you get those skill increases. So you may want to put them in things like diplomacy and stuff like that. So let's go on to the next page and see what else we got. So for the druid, like I said before, Arcana, religion, occultism, in this situation, she has nature. Now, if we flip back to the actual druid page itself, which is like, 125 or something like, page 129, you can see when you roll a druid right off the bat, the skills they get. They're going to be trained in nature, which I've got circled in yellow there. So that means she's going to have a benefit. Now, if she were to try to identify a dagger, don't just assume because it's a magic item that say it's a sacrificial dagger. Say the GM says it looks like a sacrificial dagger. Well, the GM could say that that's an occult check because it's kind of an ancient mystery. But then again, does that mean that the wizard can't figure it out because he's trained in Arcana? But it's magical. So did someone create it and craft it? So is it just limited to Arcana? I would encourage GMs not to go down that route, but it's really up to you. That interpretation is really up to you. But the way the rules are written, they basically say that one of these 4 will work. So in this situation, a druid wants to use nature, okay? So she can use her corresponding skill of nature to understand primal things to identify a magic item. So if she's going to use once again, the general skill of identify magic, she can use her primal magical tradition, which is nature, which goes into her skill called nature, and that's where she could get her bonuses from, that would make her skill modifier. So when she rolls a d20, she adds that skill modifier, and that's the best way for her to be successful. Even at level 1, right? If you had a DC of 15, this kid's already got +7. She just needs an 8 or higher. So even right away, that's identifying something that's pretty lenient. As things get harder, even if it was a difficulty check of 20, an expert level check, she's still got +7. She just needs a 13 or higher to hit it, which is like what, 45% chance to hit it, or 40. So that's not too bad. You kind of want the game to move along. That's why I think the penalties are a little bit harsher if you fail. So if you do fail, it takes a long. You can't sit there and chain spam trying to identify things. All right. So let's move on to this last section here. So we got the druid. We saw what she can do. This is a good way for her to identify something. Once again, I want to kind of go back to this one chart. When you look at your class, there's a place called a class list. It's usually like the second page of your class. That's going to show you on that left-hand column where every single character has it there. There's always a table for them. It says, when are you going to get what, right? So check your class list as you level to see, when do I get ability to pick any skill? When do I get a skill increase? When do I get a skill feat? Because this type of stuff is not a skill feat. This is going to come from a skill increase. Now, what does it mean when you do an increase? It means you're going from untrained to trained to expert to master to legendary. Now, you can only get to master once again when you get to 7. You only get to legendary when you get to 15. So you can kind of plan ahead. If you find yourself in a campaign where like, wow, I'm playing a druid, I got +7, I'm trying to identify things, but this GM wants me to make Arcana checks all the time. There's nothing I can do about it. Maybe I want to throw a point into Arcana. That way I can at least get my ability modifier and my proficiency bonus will be a little bit better because I have nothing in there now. Like you can see, hers is pretty low. It's 0, right? Even though it's an intelligence check. Her ability modifier is only like, what? It's like plus nothing. So if she's a level 12 druid with trained in Arcana, she could at least have a decent modifier to try to identify a magical item. So that's pretty much what we want to do. So when you find your magic item, you get ready to identify it, remember all you need to do is consider one of those 4 basic skill lines, which are kind of magical in nature, and from there you can start making an attempt to try to identify something, and if you critically succeed, you learn all kinds of things about it. So I wanted to keep the video kind of short today, not too long-winded. If you have any questions or comments, just leave it below. Be sure obviously to like and subscribe. We're going to do more and more videos. Some will be long, some will be short. We'll try to cover more particular details that while I've been running the game, I found have tripped people up because they've done it differently in another game, and those are the kind of things I'm trying to hone in on because I want to encourage people who haven't played the game and didn't play Pathfinder 1 to get a handle on some of the twists to the rules that may be unfamiliar to some of you. All right, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you again real soon. See you later.